I think something about that album that resonates with me is just the no holds barred, really uniqueness of it. They approach music and time signatures and harmonies and melodies, and this isn't just from that album, in all sorts of different ways, and they pretty much break the rules so they can rebuild them again. As far as, I mean, the band's music, you can't find anybody, I think, today in rock music that hasn't been influenced by Alice in Chains.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We've gotten to play and tour with those guys, and they're all really sweet people too.
Yeah, and ever since their newer releases and acquiring William, who is also an incredible vocalist, and this is coming from a guy who is like top 3 favorite singers of all time. Lane Staley's in there, but I think William's amazing too. And they're inspiring newer generations too. You know, with that sludgy Alice in Chains sound.
And with this particular album, it's timeless. You know, you can. I've introduced so many people that are like, "Who is that?" to this album, and they're like, "Where has this been all my life?" Well, it's actually been 30 years. You're a little late to the party.
No, Dirt is a crown jewel of their discography. I feel like it's the one album that you really get the full understanding of their sound in that album.
So, Alice in Chains is one of those bands that, like, when I was getting into hard music, you know, like most people, the first thing I kind of turned to was the radio. And so, you know, that's how, you know, you find all of your favorite bands. As a kid, you learn about them. I was learning about Nirvana, and I was learning about, you know, Disturbed and Linkin Park and all those bands, and Alice in Chains was one of those bands. You know, that I would hear, like, Wood on the radio all the time. I would hear Rooster on the radio all the time. And those kind of, like, pulled me in. I've always been, like, a really big fan of ominous-sounding, creepy-sounding, like heavy music, hard rock, metal, whatever. And so they like perfected that pretty much with the haunting harmonies, like what Lane and Jerry do together and all of that. So like I became a big fan of theirs. I learned a lot of their stuff on guitar. A lot of those songs on that record in particular. So for me, it was just kind of like they were one of those bands too that taught me that like you can have heavy music or like very like deep and dark music, and it doesn't have to be like the heaviest musically, but you listen to Alice in Chains and it's heavy, you know, like it's soul in your soul. It's a heavy band. They're very heavy. So like I think that record is very cool in my like formative years as a musician and as a guitar player, learning about melodies and harmonies and learning how to write dark music and learning how to write like catchy dark music. That's another one. You can sing Alice in Chains choruses back, but it's not like cheesy, you know. It's just they're very talented. You know, Jerry is very talented, one of my favorite guitar players. So definitely a great band and a band that'll be around forever. You know, their music will be around forever. So
I was blown away when I heard that record the first time. Like you said earlier, Down in a Hole. That's just down in a hole. It's just like. It was a reflection of this darkness that I had in myself, that it was starting to awaken me to those feelings. Like, these are real feelings. I got to find a way to work through this shit. Music would be a great way. So it inspired me to, like, tackle my demons through music. Wood's another great track. The drums on that, the drums and the bass, the rhythm section on that track is iconic. You know, speaking of, I've become friends with Mike Inez through the years, which is, like, trips me out, and it's just lovely to see those dudes still out there ripping. Rest in peace, Lane Staley. Like, we lost a great one in that dude.
So yeah, Alice in Chains, happy 30th anniversary on Dirt. I think what first struck me was the album cover itself, and recently saw in a magazine how they shot the cover. It was very, very interesting as well. Yeah, Alice in Chains has always been one of those bands, you know, I know they came from the grunge scene, and I was at the perfect age for them at when they were doing that. You know, went from like listening to punk rock and just learning guitar, and I hadn't discovered like metal yet, Slayer and Metallica and Testament and Iron Maiden and all that stuff, and they were a great buffer because I wanted to get into metal, but I wanted something of my own, you know, and to me, Alice in Chains offered that, you know, and they were different than a lot of the other bands. I think it was because of their songwriting abilities and the great production on all their records, and Jerry singing, you know, is you know, maybe like overlooked a lot, but he really is an awesome songwriter slash singer, harmonizing. You know, that's what really is to me what Alice in Chains is really about. And when I think of them and all those songs on that record, you know, it's that bend that Jerry's very famous for, the bow, wow, wow. You know, it's very cool, and I've tried to use that in songs too. I just can't quite do it like he can, but.
To me, Alice in Chains is a rhythm-based band. You know, I consider Jerry Cantrell a rhythm guitar player, so any band that's heavy, that as rhythm-based, like I instantly kind of go to them. So, yeah, Jerry, he's a legend. You know, I look at guys like him, I'm like, damn, like how do you write those riffs? You know, and I was just reading a quote from Jerry Cantrell like 30 years ago, and he said that I'm just paraphrasing the quote, but he said like, we deal with our daily demons through our music, and that just connected with me because I get what he was saying, especially being like in more towards like the rhythm side of music. It's like, cause we're like that as well. We're a rhythm-based band, and you know, I don't want to get spiritual again, but I know where those riffs come from. You know, you turn your feelings into sounds, and to hear a legend in the whole heavy music genre and rock genre, to say that is like I just kind of connected towards that. So it's good. It's cool to see that shit, you know.
So the rooster, I never understood the meaning of this song, you know, for years and years until we got to hang out with Jerry. He's like, oh no, it's about my dad.
Yeah, Jerry's
and he's
dad,
like, just so happens that my dad's at the show tonight. And it was so cute. We were like hanging out by the buses, and his dad is adorable. He comes up and he squeezes my cheeks. He's like, I'm gonna be side stage for that voice tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then we were in Texas somewhere, at Dallas, I think, and we ran into Vinnie Paul, and so we took the rooster to Vinnie Paul's cat house,
the clubhouse, yeah.
The clubhouse, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's getting lap dances, and they're like, you know, the girls
He
are
was the life
dancing.
of the party, man.
Yeah,
What a guy.
He
yeah.
was the center of attention on that tour.
Oh, yeah.
And that track Rooster, that was one of those things that I really had a struggle with understanding my father's story as a Vietnam veteran. It almost gave me like a look into my father's life, even though the song wasn't about my dad. And the struggle. And I love the way that they just put that, like, wrestled with the darkness, but then put it into this music that just drew you in and just, it made you feel, man. So, classic album. Thank you guys. Alice in Chains, 30 Years of Dirt. That's fucking amazing.
One of the funny relationships that I have with Alice in Chains is I hesitated for a very, very, very long time on allowing myself to understand that they are a huge influence on kind of not a single genre, not on songwriting, but an influence on an entire era, right? And with that hesitation, I think I feel lucky that I hesitated on diving in. So all of my friends growing up, one of their favorite bands, and all my friends were like, Alice in Chains, Alice in Chains, and I was like, no, not because I didn't like it, but because everybody loved it so much, right? And then I remember when I started writing music, not so much for this, but for other bands and all that, I would write something, and my buddy would be like, that sounds like this. And I'm like, there's no way it does, because I don't listen to that. And I realized, without even deciding to listen to these records, just by having it in my peripheral, just by having it around me, just by knowing that it exists, it's this absolute, just linked into the cosmos existence of, hey, this is important, and this is a direction that you can't deny, right?
So I was of the sort of perfect discovery age when that record came out, And at the time when the record came out, I was really into like very raw kind of punk music, and stuff that was generally like very noisy and very loose, very expressive, but also a classic rock fan. And I think the thing that really resonated with me initially about Alice in Chains was the fact that they so definitely all were world-class musicians. I think back to the first time I heard that record, and I remember thinking to myself just how much the arrangements and the performances and the sort of sound of the record reminded me of like an older era of music, one that had, at least to me at that point, one which I wasn't very in touch with. I was like 12 or 13, so it's not like I had much of a music pedigree at that point. But there were shades of Zeppelin and Sabbath in that music, and most importantly, it came across in the guitars. Like there was a really developed, really cool, really creative sense of being of having a guitar player who could actually play more traditional leads and like really seem to have access to the the spirit of classic rock and roll, but who was also putting kind of in the 90s what was a modern kind of doomy twist on it, which I really appreciated. And the vocals were sung, and the songs were while the songs had that classic rock appeal to me, the lyrics had the appeal to me that I understood what the singer was on about, or so I thought at the time. And so it was kind of like a contemporary take on a type of music that I wasn't hearing otherwise. And I grew up in a relatively, small town, and in order to play music, we would have to learn the songs that we saw on MTV or heard on the radio. And I remember everybody in my town knew at least one Alice in Chains song, and there was there's only 10 or 12 of us, but we could all play drums to this song and bass to this song, and like Wood was a huge song for me because it came out at that right time and had the full impact.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan too. I feel like too, when like quite a few times this past year, when we were like tracking vocals and stuff for our new record, we'll often reference like some of their harmonic arrangements with the vocals. Like that was always my favorite thing about Alice in Chains, like Them Bones. Like the riff is amazing, and then they have these like really complex vocal arrangements, but it doesn't sound complex when you listen to it. It just like fits right in such a cool way, and like that was always really striking to me about specifically Dirt. It's just like it has the heaviness and like the vibe of stuff like Jar of Flies, where it's like really like vocally harmonic, but it's just like super heavy too. It's fucking awesome.
I just think that whole album, and I've revisited it this year just because I've seen other people talking about the anniversary, and so just out of curiosity I revisited it anyway. I think it's so interesting to be able to create something like that has so much like angst and like sorrow and anger, like, but it feels so passionate and it feels so artful still. So I think that's such a great example of a band both like celebrating some technicality. So someone like myself who heard that when they were, that came out when I was like 3. So when I was old enough to remember that I was hearing that album, I think it's so cool to have something that has so much technicality in it, but that no musicians are stepping on the heart of the song. So the songs are all still so beautifully written, and everyone it's like, I think, a really great example of just like a record that was cut where everything just feels very balanced. It feels like a very balanced record to me. Just I listened to it like a week ago, and that's the thing that really resonated with me, is that you can have it all. Like you can write a beautiful song that still has heaviness and this moodiness, and is still introducing people to other types of music, but no one is. Everyone feels confident. No one's stepping on each other and trying to be flashy. Until it's time to get flashy, when we got some guitar solos.
Well, for me, Alice in Chains changed my life. They were definitely a movement. His vocals, Lane's vocals, are incredible. The harmonies with Jerry is something that definitely, I feel they are definitely the root to a lot of the bands that are still existing right now. Their legacy will never die. I have a lot of stories. I'm so proud of William Duvall being the new lead singer. We kind of grew up together. I grew up underneath him in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm so proud of his success with the band. But I can tell you a quick story, other than all that, to show you how incredible Alice in Chains is. My 5-year-old son, who's 6 now, just recently went to Breaking Benjamin, Bush, Alice in Chains concert. Yoshi used to be our head of security. He's head of security for all of them guys, and he had them on stage and everything, and he watched Bush, and he watched Breaking Benjamin, and I got to fly home for their first day of school in the middle of this tour to make sure they made it to school, and we were sitting in the car, and I said, well, you had a good time at the concert? He said, I loved it, Daddy. He said, I had so much fun. I said, who's your favorite band? Looked at me, said, he said, Alice in Chains. And it gave me chill bumps that his little bitty heart understands music to that point, to know that music right there is the root of what we're trying to do and what we're doing. So I thought that was really cool. So that's my Alice in Chains story, and I got so many more.
I have a bit of an unfair tie to it because that's actually where the namesake of Lane comes from, and which is like funny because I knew that as a very little kid, and then refinding their music as an older person and sort of like getting really into it and being like, Jesus, like it's so sick. I mean, and Lane, like the other Lane, is like the coolest fucking singer, I think, and just like so like full on the whole time. Like I mean, it's always inspired me, you know what I mean? And then especially getting more into it as I was older, it's been really cool.
Sean's drumming is very influential for me, I think. I mean, I really love that album. I don't even know any other way to say it. I mean, the album before, just hearing the development and the lineage between the album before it, and then listening to all those songs, I mean, it was very influential for me, and I still listen to it all the time.
Yeah, and so. I think also like, it's just always been kind of a big thing for us. Yeah.